next speakers. They are Ruth Deenan and Natalie Anderson. And Ruth is the international coordinator of the Hague Mothers campaign. And Natalie is a Hague Mother activist, founder of Family Court Crisis, and a member of the Hague Mothers UK project team. And the title of their talk today is Hague Mothers, Ending the Injustices of the Hague Abduction Convention. So thank you so much, Ruth and Natalie, and over to you.
We're going to talk about the Hague Abduction Convention, which is an international treaty which has been signed by over 100 countries worldwide, but it's now being used to control and abuse mothers and children worldwide. So what we're going to do, we're going to show a short video which explains the problem. Then Natalie will talk about the on-the-ground reality for mothers and children. And then I'll talk a little bit about the campaign we've got going to try and end these injustices. And I'm going to ask you for your help right here and now.
The 1980 Hague Convention on International Parental Child Abduction was designed to ensure the swift and safe return of children who are taken across international borders by one parent without the other parent's permission. It's usually very effective, but there's a problem. The convention was originally designed to deal with fathers who abduct children and to protect mothers and children, but that's changed. Now, in over 75% of cases, the abducting parent is the mother. Many of them are fleeing domestic abuse.
There's nothing that actually protects a fleeing mother and child. No local justice, no international justice, nothing.
The convention forces children, and therefore mothers, to return to the country they have fled. Leaving an abuser is terrifying, fleeing across borders doubly so. Mothers are leaving their homes, their jobs, their friends. They're traumatized and often in fear of their lives. They try to flee to safety, and then the Hague Convention hits them.
Being in court was so terrifying, so stressful that it has left me traumatized. And then they sent my sons back to the man who was beating me, raping me.
Hague mothers are rarely entitled to legal aid. There are not many specialist lawyers available, and they only have a few weeks and sometimes only a few days to prepare their case. The only defence available to them is Article 13b of the Convention. The court does not have to order the return of a child if the mother can prove that there is a grave risk that returning them would expose them to physical or psychological harm or place them in an intolerable situation. But grave risk is interpreted very narrowly. Domestic abuse against the mother is rarely seen as a grave risk or intolerable situation for the child, in spite of extensive evidence to the contrary. Children are almost always returned to the country and often into the care of the abusive parent.
My ex has filed a Hague Convention case against us after we fled Ireland last year. I just know they're going to send my kids back and then I'll have to follow. But what happens to us when we get there? What if he kills us?
Mothers must choose whether to return with their children or send them back alone. Those who do return face post-separation abuse, destitution, homelessness, isolation, and sometimes even criminal proceedings. They often have no family and no support networks, a textbook context for continued abuse.
It is not in any child's best interest to grow up with a mother who is isolated or unemployed and depressed, trapped in a foreign country by an abusive ex-partner. There has never been a single day when I have felt safe or felt that my children were safe here.
We, Hague Mothers, aim to end this injustice with the help of international support from lawyers, domestic violence professionals, academics, women's groups, human rights activists, child psychologists, the Hague Mothers themselves, and the general public. We call on the Hague Secretariat to recognise the grave risk and intolerable situation caused by exposure to domestic abuse. domestic abuse is alleged, we ask for the following amendment to the Convention. Legal aid for mothers. A rebuttable presumption of no return. Welfare hearings held in a safe location. The views and wishes of the child to be fully considered. And a restriction on the use of protective measures to defeat Article 13B. We are the Hague Mothers. We're an unstoppable global movement for justice.
So I would like to introduce you to some real Hague mothers. Many of these women are silenced by the secrecy of the family courts. They could be imprisoned if they speak out, which could happen to me too, actually. So this is Sarah Marie. She sought asylum with her sons in Canada because their father had tried to kill her and beat them. They were not protected by the family courts in the USA. They were not protected by Canada either. Sarah Marie was arrested with a gun to her head. She was charged in the US with felonies for abduction. She has not seen her children for 3.5 years. This is Jan Ford. She's the author of a book called The Loving Abductor. She was sent back to France from the UK to the man who had abused her. The French police told her that she and her son were not safe in France. And so she was forced to go on the run. UK law now accepts that children are the direct victims of the abuse of their mothers. However, judges in Hague cases almost never accept that. Like one of the women in the video said, you cannot argue that putting children into a situation where their mothers are controlled, abused, jobless, isolated, homeless is in their best interests. But that is the exception, the norm, and not the exception. Actually, I also wanted to say, when you force mothers and children to go on the run because you won't protect them, you put them into an extremely vulnerable situation. They cannot live normal lives at all. This is Anita Guerra. So she was in the UK with the father's consent with her children. He filed a Hague case against her, nevertheless, which is not unusual. She lost and returned to the US with her children. She was in court in a custody case within 24 hours of landing in the USA and lost custody of her children. She has not seen her children for 8 years now. Like me, she was ordered by the family court to pay maintenance for the privilege of having an abusive man bring up her children. If she goes to America, she would risk being arrested. Jane's First Nations daughter was forced out of Australia back to her abusive father in Belgium, even though the court found that this would cause an intolerable situation for this child. This 3-year-old little girl has not seen her mother for 6 months now. This decision of the court was a violation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. All of these cases that you see involve abuses of the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child and other pieces of international law. But judges do not consider the international law is applicable, or the human rights law is applicable to family law cases. Bella, the Hague Convention was used preemptively to trap her, a British full-time mother, and her children in the USA by her wealthy ex-husband while they went through custody proceedings. The father now has sole legal and physical custody of the children. I believe that the Hague Convention is being used as a form of trafficking of mothers and children. The way that mothers and children are treated in the family courts in the USA is becoming more and more extreme. Not many people realize that there's an enormous problem with corruption in the US justice system. This is an issue that doesn't only affect family cases, and I believe that our courts in the UK and Europe are going the same way if we don't take action. This is a democracy issue which affects all of us. Anna is a US mother of 4 who relocated with her husband to Switzerland. He became violent and threatened to kill her. He returned to the USA, and threatened to take custody of the children if she returns. She believed him. So she's been trapped with no help from the courts in Switzerland for 11 years. She is $1 million in debt because of all of the legal fees that she's been forced to pay, and because the US courts ordered that she must cover the private health insurance for herself and 4 children with no income. Anna believes that the lawyers and the judges who put her through this torment have enjoyed seeing her suffer. I believe Anna. This is Janelle. Her son lived with her in France. She was only in a casual relationship with his father, but nonetheless, she promoted her child's relationship with his father. But after a holiday in the UK, the British father filed a Hague case against her. She was arrested. Her child, who was, I believe, about 10 months old at the time, was taken from her. He was still breastfeeding. She was thrown into prison. She spent 3 days in prison crying her eyes out over being ripped apart from her child like that. A UK court gave custody of the child to the father. For 3 years, Janelle has only had 10 hours a week of supervised contact with her child in the UK. She's here, she is struggling to find work. And as an overseas citizen, she doesn't have access to legal aid. Her ex-husband, partner, however, is very wealthy and is able to hire a big firm of lawyers. Hazel, her ex-boyfriend, used the Hague Convention and UK court to seize the children from the United States, where she was on holiday with one of her children, and custody of both children. But her ex-partner is not the biological father. Their children were conceived by IVF from an anonymous donor. He had no parental responsibility. And one of the clauses of the Hague Convention is you must not only have parental responsibility, but you must also be exercising it. But she is now completely estranged from her children. One of them is reporting having gender dysphoria. This law firm, which you'll find online right now, is boasting publicly about being able to take children and give them to parents who are not the men who are not the biological fathers. And the barrister who has this on his own webpage sits as a part-time High Court judge. Cassandra Hasanovic was stabbed to death by her ex-partner after a court ordered their return to the UK. She told the Australian court that her ex-husband had threatened to cut her up into little pieces and send her piece by piece to her family. It didn't take long after her return with her children to the UK for him to stab her in front of the children. So this is my case. I've been battling to protect my children for 7 years. My children were abducted by their father in 2016 and taken to Croatia from the UK. So this is the kind of case for which the Hague Convention was originally designed. I succeeded in securing an order for my children's return, but my ex-husband threatened that he would corrupt the courts. He is a former intelligence services official. He works as a civil servant today in the Croatian public service, and his threats came to fruition. In the context of the collapse of the rule of law, my children and I found ourselves trapped, isolated, stalked, harassed. I had no income and no support, and we were completely unprotected by the law in Croatia. I managed to get out of Croatia with my children, and I came to the UK hoping that the courts here might protect us, but they didn't. My evidence of abusive behaviour, including the abduction of my children and the failure of the Croatian authorities to protect us, were ignored. I didn't know then that this is the rule and not the exception in UK family court cases. I later found out that the judge on my case isn't even a family lawyer, and he sits on a panel of the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, but he violated our human and legal rights. My lawyers told me that I could not appeal. I later found out that this wasn't correct, but it was too late. So I made a financial claim against the judge, and this is what he responded. My complaint was about the failure of duty of care towards my children and negligence. He said a judge does not owe a common law duty of care to litigants. Well, I was talking about my children. So who actually does have a duty of care to the children. And also judges, he says, are entitled to immunity from suit. So who is accountable exactly? So we were forced, my children were sent back to Croatia. I continued fighting and campaigning, armed with more information I'd gained in the UK about what was going on. But I found that the judges do not care about the law or about evidence. And at the end of last year, I found myself in a court hearing with 6 people who were under investigation by the Croatian Office for Anti-Corruption and Organised Crime. None of them were removed from the case, and the judge believed them and ignored my evidence and my children's wishes. Also in the hearing, and this ties on very nicely from from Amy's speech, there were 2 expert witnesses, a psychiatrist and a psychologist, who specialise in parental alienation. Other mothers told me that they had victimised them as victims of domestic abuse. These expert witnesses accused parents who report abuse as being manipulative, alienating, as being paranoid, or having personality disorders with absolutely no evidence to silence them and their children. And that is exactly what happened in my case. My children said very clearly and consistently that they want to return to live with me in England. And they told about a dozen professionals and could not understand why they were not listened to. And at the beginning of this year, the situation got really bad. My sons refused to go back to their father, and I could see that 7 years of this risked making them seriously ill. I had to stand up to the ludicrous court orders that I had been reporting for years were unlawful. And at the end of last year, after that hearing and the judgment, it emerged that that same court was embroiled in a massive child trafficking scandal. And the Croatian government refuses to investigate what happened to over 120 children brought from Democratic Republic of Congo for adoption into Croatia since 2016. International adoption of children from DR Congo is prohibited, and the journalists found evidence of shocking malpractice. So I was forced to take my children to Switzerland to protect us from inhuman treatment by their father and by the Croatian authorities. And what happened there was shocking. I was told that because we have British and Croatian citizenship, we have no right to asylum. The authorities disclosed our whereabouts to the authorities that we had fled from. The children were sent back to Croatia against their wishes and against the explicit advice of the Swiss lawyer appointed to represent them. This is a multiple violation of international law. A refugee is a person who flees from violence, persecution, threats to their physical integrity, and it should include psychological integrity because the severe stress impacts our physical health too. Those are our rights under the Geneva Convention. And in Europe, we also have the right to asylum under the Istanbul Convention. It has 2 articles that explicitly state that victims of gender-based violence must be protected under asylum law, but states are not implementing the Istanbul Convention. The rights of women are in a parlous state, and the courts are treating women like surrogates and children like the property of their father. My children were treated like objects, and we were all manhandled by the Swiss police as they unlawfully took my children before we even had a chance to appeal. We saw very clearly that mothers and children are not entitled to asylum because of the Hague Convention. And at that moment, we felt the jackboot of the patriarchy crushing our necks, helped by female judges. So, as the first speaker pointed out, in recent weeks, concerns about the family courts, including the Hague Convention, were raised at the UN Human Rights Council. And the Special Rapporteur for Violence Against Women has raised this as an international human rights issue with state-level responsibility. But who is going to hold the states to account? I believe this is a humanitarian crisis. There is nowhere for mothers and children who are victims of abuse to hide. So where does that leave us? My children are right now in Croatia against their will. They're asking me, Mum, are you going to appeal? As little as they can, because their father controls all of their conversations with me by phone. I am afraid to go to Croatia in case of being arrested or sectioned. My children wrote to me on Mother's Day. One of them says, about me. She hasn't got any bad points except that grandma cooks better than her. That's my mother. And the good points are, I can't say them all because it would take me thousands of years. The best thing is hugs. My other son says, I really love my mum and I hope I can see her very soon. But I can't tell them when we can see each other. Their dad wants us to only see each other for 2 hours a week under supervision of the same Croatian social services who victimized me and failed all of us. He wants me to go back to the same court to fight for contact, and I will do neither of those things. The children's Swiss law told the judges very clearly that my children cannot expect good life outcomes if they're forced to return to Croatia to live with their father. I feel powerless, but I'm not. I'm campaigning and I don't know yet what I will do, but I do know that I will find a way. Thank you for listening, and back to Ruth now.
Mothers like Natalie, who are absolute warriors, and in the worst cases and the worst circumstances, they just never give up. It's women like Natalie that got me involved in this whole campaign. So Hague Mothers was set up in response to Mother Stories. And we have one very simple aim, and that is to end the injustices created by the Hague Convention, particularly for mothers and children who are victims of abusive relationships. That aim, which is a pretty big one, can only be managed through the International Sisterhood, and that's how we're working. So it's an entirely voluntary campaign. We have no funding, though we're supported by Phileas Charity, and everything we do is co-produced with about 90 women from across the world, and we're growing all the time. We also have 2 very nice chaps who advise us, but essentially 90 women on this campaign. So there are Hague mothers, lawyers, domestic violence professionals, academics, journalists, psychiatrists, counsellors, feminists, children's rights advocates, and many more. And the way it works is that we ask people what their skills are, what their knowledge is, and ask for their ideas about what action should we take, and that's what we do. And we're working in an unexpectedly positive context.